Okay, let me ask you a very specific question about tax reform. You can get some general comments as well. But there was something that changed my viewpoint, not viewpoint, but it gave me some perspective on the state and local tax deduction. It was in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. That's an important part of this whole equation. It's 1.2 trillion of the tax savings that you're able to do, and it's going to be. The Journal is basically imploring Republicans not to listen to the rhetoric that in the blue states that it's going to be more painful. That you really need to do that. Do you have a high degree of confidence you can sell that part of the plan, and will that remain in the plan, the non-deductibility of state and local taxes?
Well, remember when we went to write this plan, the first thing you always do is set out principles. And the first principle is you wanted it to be fair. You wanted to close loopholes. You wanted it to be pro-growth, and you wanted to make America competitive around the world. So it wasn't to write 50 individual plans for each state. It was to be fair across the nation. So if we write a plan that's fair across the nation, you write one tax code. Unfortunately, when you have states such as California, which I come through from, and also New York, they want to raise their taxes with the argument that let's let other Americans across the country pay for that, in essence giving you a loophole. If you write a fair plan, I think that principle plays with everywhere else. And when you look at the end of the day of what we did on our plan, by doubling the deduction, the number of individuals who actually itemized, it will not touch everybody in that state. It's probably a few. And we're not done crafting what that means. I know the acronym is SALT, the state and local tax, but there's a way, I think, when you look at what Kevin Brady does at the end of the day, the majority of all those individuals in the state will actually have a tax cut. But it will also change the policies. In California, they continue to raise taxes to build a train to nowhere. They waste money throughout, and they do that based upon taking a loophole in a tax basis across America, making it unfair for the rest of Americans to pay for their mismanagement of their own state.
Leader McCarthy, Jonathan Swan, that all sounds good, but you're a very sharp political strategist. You know that 12 of the 32 most competitive Republican House districts are in those 4 blue states. You know the Democratic path to a majority runs through those 4 blue states. You know a lot of your members are worried about this. How worried are you about the political fallout from including the state and local deduction?
Well, Jonathan, I know we make policy in the world of politics. It could be the very best policy, but do you have enough votes to go through?
That's my question.
What I truly believe here is you have to take the totality, the total part of the tax cut, of bill that goes forward. So if you're going to look at and argue to save one loophole, that becomes a real problem. So that's why we had last week, we didn't have votes during the day. We sat back. We took 5 hours walking every individual through. And before individuals jump to conclusions, never say what you will not do. Look at the bill in the entirety of the bill and talk to your constituents about it. But yes, this is going to be an area that I think we're going to have to work through as we go. And Kevin Brady's not done in the crafting of this area. So I believe at the end of the day, people will like what happens coming out of Ways and Means.
Everybody, leader, should read that piece in the Journal if you haven't seen it, because you're going to put the Democrats in the position of arguing for people that itemize their taxes. I mean, the people that are getting hurt by losing the state deductions are all top 10 percenters, almost all of them. It's only people who itemize. So the people that we're really crying about here, that it's not fair, they're not the people that they're trying to help in the first place, really, right?
They'll be arguing, yes, for the highest income. They'll be arguing for a loophole, and they'll be arguing for the rest of America to subsidize California and New York's spending policies around the country.
The profligate, yeah, a lot of Democratic administrations got some of these places, some of these states into the position they're in right now, and now they're going to.
Leader, by one of the estimates that I read over the weekend, it said that people who make 100 to 150,000, some of them will indeed be paying a tax increase under this plan, and that for people making 150 to 300,000, granted, depending on where you're from, that sounds awfully wealthy, but in places like New York or Connecticut, maybe not quite as much. Anyway, people making 150 to 300,000, that the majority of them would pay an increase. Does that sound right by the math that you've seen?
No, because I don't know how somebody wrote that if we haven't put in the income brackets yet of where they go. So that's speculation. That's somebody writing something when they don't have all the facts. I would say let's wait and see what comes out of Ways and Means. Remember, we took 7 brackets and we lowered them to 3. We took the 10% and took it to 0, the 15 to 12. We made it competitive around the world, which your viewers know more better than anybody else. The $4 trillion sitting overseas, letting that come back. We made small business down to 25%, the lowest it's been in more than 80 years. You know the job creation that will be. So what we're talking about today is what people are arguing for, a loophole. We ended loopholes that actually most people would talk about before you write something. Make it fair for all Americans, not make one plan for one state and another plan for another. So wait till we put the income levels into those brackets, and then we can analyze. Because at the end of the day, we doubled the standard deduction, which we let families keep their first $24,000 tax-free. I think at the end of the day, the majority of Americans here, especially the middle income, are going to be excited about what's happening. Everybody else in America is going to be very excited because the growth level is going to come up. More jobs are going to be created. Right. And we're going to sit back and look at this interview and wonder why we had an argument over a loophole when we're sitting back and holding the rest of America back from competing around the world.
Well, in the end, Leader, it's going to be the Democrats have been demagoguing corporations for however long you want. You know, you didn't build this. Hillary Clinton said, "Don't let anyone tell you corporations are the ones that where that came from. Don't let anyone tell you they create jobs." But they do. But I don't know whether the public connects the dots, because only 12% think that you should cut taxes on corporations. So you've got a sales job to do, or you got to get your own party members in the Senate. You got to give them some backbones, because they didn't have any on health care. Not all of them, but you know, the amount that you needed. So if you're not going to convince the public and turn them around, where all these guys have cover in their constituencies, then you still have whips around there? You guys got called. Some of you guys are called whips. Are pretty ineffective, or have been recently. But you got to keep your own guys in line. If this really is good for the country, they got to know that and not wimp out.
Yeah. Now let's be honest here. In the House, the health care bill went through.
I know. I'm not talking about the House.
I got more than 273.
I'm talking about those patricians over in the Senate. You know.
I'm very concerned about them as well. But no one said tax reform would be easy. What happens when you first put out a tax plan, especially if it's fair, think of all the loopholes that have been created through the years because our tax code was, the rates were so high. So they wanted to put these specific loopholes in to protect certain industries or certain states. Well, now when you change all that, yeah, people are going to fight. So have people look at the entire bill itself, let us work through the process of where we're going, and at the end of the day, measure it based upon, is this going to put America in a stronger position to compete around the world? Is this going to give your children, the next generation, a better opportunity than they have today? Small businesses create more jobs than anything else in America, and this is going to lower the rate to 25, right, the lowest they've been in 80 years. I created my first small business when I was 21 years old. I don't know if I could do that same thing today.
Right. Leader McCarthy, on that point, you're a former small business owner. Do you believe that borrowing is an ordinary business expense? And do you believe that small businesses should be able to continue to deduct the interest on their debt?
Well, that's one element we're continuing to work through. Yes, it takes borrowing to get into small business. It takes capital in there. Expensing is very important in a small business, especially when I want to invest and make my business better. I want to be able to expense that out and not wait 5 years. That makes me make that investment going forward. So yes, there's an offshoot on both of how we deal with that in this tax code, and I believe we'll be able to do it to continue to make us even more competitive.
And where's that? Because Paul Ryan, didn't he originally want to eliminate it, and now you're going to cap it? What's going on there?
There's still elements in there where Ways and Means still has different elements in here to work through and finalize the details. And that's one of the elements that they're working on.
And when do you come down?
It's expensive. Look, I know it takes capital for a business, so I want to look at that. And not all businesses are the same, especially when it comes to real estate and others. And that's what Kevin Brady has been sitting down for the